Most people know Wendy's as one of the biggest burger chains in the world. What they don't know is that the man behind it did not start with rich parents, a business degree, or some giant investor waiting to back him. He started as a shy, abandoned kid who spent most of his childhood feeling unwanted, and at one point, he walked into a life-changing opportunity with just $40 in his pocket. And that's what makes this story so powerful. Because Dave Thomas did not build Wendy's by arriving first. He was late. McDonald's was already dominant. Burger King was already growing. The fast food war had already started, and most people believed there was no room left for another burger chain. In fact, some experts were convinced his prices were too high and that his restaurant would fail fast. They were wrong. Today, Wendy's has thousands of locations around the world and generates billions in sales. But to understand how that happened, you have to go back to the beginning, long before Square Burgers, drive-thrus, and Where's the Beef. Dave Thomas was born in 1932 in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Just weeks after he was born, she gave him up. He was later adopted by Rex and Oliver Thomas, but even with a new family name, life never felt stable. When Dave was still very young, his adoptive mother died. That loss changed everything. His father worked hard, but he wasn't warm, and he wasn't around much. The family moved constantly, from one place to another, never really settling down. Then came a stepmother who made home feel even colder. Dave grew up quiet, shy, and deeply lonely. But in the middle of that unstable childhood, something unexpected happened. Because the apartments they lived in were often so small and poorly equipped that eating out became normal. Dave and his father would go to diners and restaurants, and for Dave, those meals became more than food. They became moments of comfort. He would sit there watching families laugh, talk, and enjoy their time together. And somewhere along the way, he realized that restaurants were not just places that served meals. They were places where people felt safe, welcomed, and connected. By the time he was 8 years old, Dave had already made a decision. One day, he would open a restaurant of his own. It sounds simple now, but for a child growing up in that kind of environment, it was a huge dream. And Dave didn't just dream about work, he chased it as a boy. He tried to find jobs anywhere he could, sometimes lying about his age just to get a chance. He bounced through odd jobs, got rejected again and again, and got fired more than once. But none of that killed his obsession with restaurants. Eventually, he landed work in the food business and soaked up everything. He learned how kitchens moved, how service worked, how standards were maintained, and how pride could come from serving a meal the right way. Every shift taught him something. Every restaurant became a classroom. When his family moved again, Dave was hired at the Hobby House restaurant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This turned into one of the most important chapters of his life. There, he met owner Phil Kloss, a man he deeply respected. Phil wasn't above any task. He would wear a suit and still sweep floors or wash dishes if needed. That humility made a huge impression on Dave. Dave worked hard enough to earn more responsibility, more hours, and eventually a place in the kitchen. For the first time, he felt proud of himself. But just as things were coming together, his father decided to move again. This time, Dave refused to go. He stayed behind. Think about that for a second. A teenager, practically on his own, choosing a restaurant over following his father because that restaurant felt more like home than home ever did. He worked brutal hours and tried to keep school going at the same time. But eventually he dropped out. He felt that everything useful he needed to learn was happening in the kitchen, not in the classroom. Then the Korean War changed the direction of his life. Knowing the draft was coming, Dave enlisted in the military. He chose food service, which may not sound glamorous, but it turned out to be one of the smartest moves he ever made. Stationed in Germany, he worked in large-scale mess operations, feeding huge numbers of soldiers under pressure, on schedule, and at consistent quality. He learned leadership, organization, efficiency, and how to solve problems fast. When he came back, he was no longer just a hard-working kid in a restaurant. He was disciplined, experienced, and ready for more. Over time, Dave moved up in the restaurant business. He married, started a family, and took on more responsibility. But money was tight. He had children to support, and his salary wasn't enough to build the future he wanted. Around that time, something happened that changed his life again. Colonel Harlan Sanders entered the picture. Sanders was trying to expand Kentucky Fried Chicken through franchising, and he needed restaurant operators he could trust. The Hobby House took a chance on KFC, and once the product was introduced, customers loved it. Dave quickly recognized what made it special, but even more importantly, he saw opportunities others missed. He noticed that more people wanted to grab food and go, so he helped create a dedicated carryout operation for chicken orders. An idea that sounds obvious now, but it was a major innovation at the time. It worked. Sales surged. KFC traffic grew. The restaurant became packed. That success led to expansion, but not all of it went well. Several locations in Columbus, Ohio were struggling badly. They were being mismanaged, losing money, and becoming a serious problem. Phil Kloss was in debt, and Dave was offered a stunning deal. If he could turn the failing stores around, he could buy in for almost nothing. It was risky. He had a family. He had stability. He could have played it safe. Instead, in 1962, with only about $40 in his pocket, Dave went to Columbus to rescue those restaurants. That decision changed everything. When he arrived, he moved fast. He got rid of managers who weren't working out. He simplified operations. He tightened quality. He sharpened the brand. He got creative with marketing because there wasn't money for traditional advertising. He traded meals for radio promotion and came up with visual ideas to make the stores stand out. And it worked. Within months, sales exploded. What looked like a desperate gamble turned into one of the best deals in restaurant history. Dave eventually sold his KFC steak for more than $1 million, making himself wealthy in the process. For most people, that would have been the finish line. For Dave Thomas, it was just the beginning. He had money now, security, status. He had beaten the odds, but he still wasn't satisfied, because the dream he had as a child was never just to make money in someone else's system. He wanted to build something of his own. He wanted his own restaurant, not fried chicken, hamburgers, and not just any burgers, better burgers. He believed there was room in the market for a place that offered fresher food, better quality, and a warmer atmosphere than the cold, mechanical feel of many fast food chains. Most of the industry was racing towards speed and sameness. Dave wanted speed too, but not at the cost of quality. Then an opportunity appeared. A friend had a space available in Columbus, Ohio, and Dave took it. He needed a name for the restaurant, something personal, something tied to family. He thought of his daughter, Melinda Lou, whose nickname in the family was Wendy because her siblings had trouble pronouncing her name when they were little. Dave adjusted it slightly. And just like that, Wendy's was born. When he designed the first restaurant, Dave didn't want it to feel like a sterile burger factory. He wanted it to feel warm, familiar, and welcoming. He drew inspiration from the old-fashioned restaurants he remembered from childhood, the kinds of places that felt human. Then came the food. This was where Wendy's really separated itself. Dave focused on fresh ingredients and made-to-order burgers. He used square patties that stuck out beyond the bun so customers could literally see the meat. It was a visual statement. We're not cutting corners here. He kept the menu simple, but everything was built around quality and value. A lot of people thought he was making a mistake. The market was already crowded. McDonald's and Burger King had huge head starts. Wendy's burgers cost more than what people were used to paying at major chains. Critics believed customers would never pay up for a fast food hamburger. But Dave trusted his instincts more than market studies. He believed that there were enough people who wanted something better. On November 15, 1969, the first Wendy's opened in Columbus, and almost immediately, it clicked. Customers showed up in big numbers. The restaurant drew attention fast. People loved the burgers, the freshness, the personality of the place, and the fact that it felt different. The first location became profitable quickly, and that gave Dave confidence to expand. But here's what separated him from a lot of founders. He did not just copy what already existed. He kept innovating. At one of the early locations, Wendy's experimented with a drive-through pickup window. Today that sounds normal. Back then it was a game changer. Once people got used to the convenience, sales surged. Cars lined up, revenue jumped. Wendy's became one of the first major burger chains to prove just how powerful drive-through service could be. Now Dave knew he had something much bigger than a single successful store. So he moved to scale. In the early 1970s, Wendy's began franchising. But Dave approached expansion aggressively. The company spread with remarkable speed. In just a few years, Wendy's went from a tiny operation to one of the fastest growing chains in America. Store count exploded. Sales soared. The company went public. And before long, Wendy's had crossed the billion-dollar sales mark in record time. Think about how insane that is. This was a man who had been abandoned as a baby, shuffled through a lonely childhood, dropped out of school, spent years working restaurant jobs, and once arrived in Columbus with just $40 in his pocket. Now he had built one of the biggest restaurant brands in the country. And still, the story wasn't over. By the early 1980s, Dave stepped away from day-to-day operations. After decades of non-stop work, he finally had the kind of life most people imagine when they think of business success. But Wendy's began to lose some of its edge after he stepped back. Expansion had created problems. Quality started slipping. Strategy became less focused. Some stores struggled, momentum faded, and that exposed something important. Wendy's worked best when it remembered what Dave cared about from the very beginning. Quality, service, cleanliness, and honesty. Eventually, Dave returned as the face of the company. This became one of the most brilliant moves in Wendy's history. While competitors leaned on flashy advertising, Wendy's put Dave Thomas himself in front of the camera. He looked real. He sounded real. He talked about the food with total conviction. Customers trusted him because he wasn't pretending to be a founder. He actually was the founder. And more importantly, he had spent his life doing the work. That authenticity connected. He appeared in hundreds of commercials and became one of the most recognizable figures in advertising. Wendy's regained momentum, rebuilt trust, and pulled off a major comeback. But for Dave, legacy was never only about burgers, because he knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without a stable, loving home. He devoted part of his later life to helping children in foster care find permanent families. In 1992, he launched the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, a cause that was deeply personal to him. It's one of the reasons his story stands out. He said he built a business empire. He said he became wealthy. He said he changed the fast food industry. But underneath all of that was still the same lonely boy who once sat in restaurants looking at other families and wishing he belonged somewhere. Maybe that's why Wendy's resonated with so many people. It didn't come from a cold strategy document. It came from a real human need, a need for comfort, for warmth, for quality, for something that felt honest. Dave Thomas passed away in 2002, but the company he built continued growing long after he was gone. Today, Wendy's operates in thousands of locations across dozens of countries and generates billions in system-wide sales. And it all traces back to one simple dream. A shy kid with almost nothing wanted to build a restaurant where people could feel good, eat well, and share time together. The wall told him it was too late. The market told him it was too crowded. Experts told him it would not work. But Dave Thomas proved that sometimes being late doesn't matter. If your product is better, your vision is clearer, and your reason for building is real enough, you can still change the entire game.